Hi, David.
You hear me okay?
You want me to message Stephanie to post a couple of items?
Yeah, if you feel like you can in the two minutes we've got.
Okay, so the towing and the MCSCS document.
Yeah, just the briefing note for the COVID reporting. And for towing, we don't have to post anything because it's verbal, and I'll say we're going to post and talk about it next time.
Okay. Just the MCSCS.
Yeah, just that briefing as long as, yeah, that sounds good. Also, do we want to post the human trafficking grant?
I don't know that we said that, but
Just the briefing note is fine, and we'll speak to the grant.
Hi, Jesse here, just checking in.
Hi, Jesse, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody dialing in? We're just waiting for things to get set up, and we'll be starting shortly after. Thank you.
Thanks, Javid.
Can you hear me, Chair? Thank you.
David, I don't see you.
Can other members see me?
I can see Javid.
I can see little facial hair going on there. It's all good.
So, Ms. Foster, it may just be the view that you have on your screen. You can toggle the buttons in the top right corner that give different options for that. So we're just going to wait a few more moments to ensure that the LPSB members sign on.
Yeah, I don't know how to do this. I've only got myself on the screen.
Do you see a little button at the top right of your screen where it says it's sort of like little squares that might indicate a grid view or an active speaker view? I don't know if perhaps that's what you're missing.
I had no problem with the other meetings and it's the same format. But anyway, don't worry, as long as I can hear you.
I just had a special delivery from my 9-year-old of a bowl full of apple slices.
I told mine to stay away.
Does he do curbside delivery, Javid? Is that an option?
I think this delivery to the basement is pretty novel for most days, so I'll take it. I see that we have our LPS admin signed in as well. Hello. Is the chief there with you? There he is. All right. We've got Mayor Holder, Deputy Mayor, Mr. Lang, Councillor Cassidy, Vice Chair Toth. Ms. Foster, do you think we're good to begin?
Sure.
All right. So call the meeting to order, the public meeting at 11:35 a.m. We'll start off with any disclosures of interest. Okay. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to our public meeting. This is definitely an unprecedented situation. Thank you to everybody who's been able to participate. We have done our utmost to ensure that our functioning remains circumstances. Through the course of the meeting, I would ask that if you're not speaking, that you try and make sure that your microphone is muted to minimize any disruption. I did want to take a few moments to say a few words. I'd like the public to be aware that your board has been continuing to work on our core business. We've had regular contact and communication with Chief Williams and LPS leadership. We appreciate that we are certainly in an unprecedented time. And from my own frontline experience as a health worker, I do appreciate the outpouring of love and support from our community. I know that there's a lot of people in our community that are hurting right now. I know that there are many people who might be struggling. What weighs perhaps the heaviest on my heart right now is the impact of this pandemic on some of the most vulnerable members of our community. So being afraid right now is normal. Being worried right now is normal. For anybody who is struggling or afraid, I want you to know that you're not alone. I'd also like to take some time to thank our London Police Service leadership and members, both sworn into positions. From the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of the London Police Services Board, I want to thank them for rising up to meet this unprecedented situation with compassion and with courage. I also want to thank them for their flexibility. We as a board appreciate that some of the challenges of navigating this circumstance is requiring a lot of flexibility in terms of whether it's related to infection control or whether it's related to navigating the challenges of technology. Overall, I want to thank our community and our LPS for rising up with courage. We're experiencing this together. This is a shared experience. We are rising up through this all together, and we will indeed get through this together. Last but not least, I want to thank our administrator, Ms. Jen Foster, for her dedication and perseverance, despite some of the technological challenges of shifting to a work from home scenario, and her guidance and support from our IT services for setting up the infrastructure for today's meeting. Ms. Foster, I'm also going to suggest perhaps you could mute your microphone just to reduce some of the feedback. All right, thank you everyone. Item 3, the introduction of addendum items in new business. There are 2 additional items we would like to add to the public agenda. One is an update on a human trafficking grant, and the other is a discussion on a COVID-19 reporting policy. Anyone move to add these 2 items to the public agenda? Moved by the mayor, seconded by Mr. Lang. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 4, minutes of the February 20th public LPSB meeting. Any discussion? No, can I get a motion?
I'll move it.
Moved by Deputy Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Cassidy. All in favor?
Yay.
Great. Item 5, the first quarterly report. This is a quarterly report on Crime Stoppers and Pursuit statistics. I will turn the floor over to Deputy Chief McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Attached, you'll find tabled the quarterly report for Crime Stoppers and Police Pursuits. We monitor these just for trends. You'll see the 5-year trend, and there are no noteworthy trends at this time. And in fact, in the first quarter, we didn't have a pursuit, which is rare for us. But for your review and any questions.
Are there any questions for Deputy Chief McIntyre? Not. Can I get a motion? Oh, question, Vice Chair Todd.
I'm just wondering in the future, Deputy Chief McIntyre, we've been moving towards, and for example, in discipline reports, details, definition sections. I suspect a lot of this is a little bit more straightforward, but I wonder if we could add a section that does some of those definitions, just so that in particular members of the public understand what they're looking at in terms of these charts, how they're tracked, and you know, even things like CDSA offenses and so on, just having one of those definition sections.
For you, Chair? Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. It was well received. I think you're right in the complaints report. They just really broaden what that means. And we in all things policing get so used to reading the terminology. So to your point, it recognizes that the public may not. And again, this report is to inform them. So absolutely, I'll work on tweaking that.
Thanks very much, and I'd like to thank Deputy McIntyre for this report. It looks like quarter 1 2020 compared to almost any other quarter, year to date at least, but it looked pretty positive, I thought, in terms of the crime stats being down. But can you comment on commercial crime? I think there's a sense that break and enters and commercial crime would be one of those things that would be, I'm not talking about residential, but commercial. It's anecdotal that there are some big issues out there, especially in the core and the like. Wonder if you or our senior team might comment on that.
You, Chair. Mayor, you might have jumped to maybe number 9, the full CID report that looks at really at a snapshot of all of the different offenses, but I can answer that now for you if you like. In relation to commercial.
Actually, I think that's on me. I just got excited to get some background on that. So I think we should wait for the right order for that. Thank you.
Any other comments on the Crime Stoppers and Pursuit statistics report? If not, can I get a motion to receive for informational purposes? Moved by the Mayor, seconded by Mr. Lang. All in favor?
Yay.
Thank you. Carried. Moving on to the next quarterly report. There's several quarterly reports at this juncture that we need to move forward with. So the next one is complaints against police. Deputy Chief McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Attached is the report. Again, it's the first quarter, and it really does look at that 5-year comparison. You'll remember from our complaint report that Vice Chair Toth referenced, we did expand that aggressively to include the definitions for the public to reference. The year at a glance has a bunch of different charts in it, and graphs really just as a visual representation of what's going on. Those don't have statistical relevance when we only look at first quarter stats, so you'll see that those are removed. There are no noteworthy trends, which I'm happy to report on, but I'd open to the floor for any questions that anyone may have.
Any questions for Deputy Chief? Seeing none, I just wanted to say again to our community that we do see this as an important part of our role, that getting feedback is super essential. We had a pretty detailed report on complaints and tried to educate the public at one of our previous public meetings. We know as a board that our service is wanting, even despite the current circumstances, for feedback and input to be continually directed. If you or anybody has concerns, it's very important to share that transparently with us. If you share it with your friends, you share it with your community, we don't know what's going on, and our incredible frontline folks don't know what's going on. So please do make sure that those lines of communications remain open. Any questions, unless a motion to receive? Anyone like to move to receive the complaints report?
I'll move it.
Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Vice Chair. All in favor?
Yay.
Great, thank you. Moving on, item 7. This is the use of force statistics from 2019. Deputy Chief Betts.
Thank you, Chair. And this report's coming to you for your information, and it's intended to provide you with an overview of the force used by members of the London Police Service during 2019. It'll also provide you with a 5-year comparison of use of force statistics, including any identifiable trends. I will say that this report's a little longer than others, but I feel it's an important opportunity to provide the board with some information and education related to the use of force and the reporting. As I go through the report, I would draw your attention to the appendix in the report. It's the Ontario use of force model, and it guides all police officers in Ontario in the use of force continuum. The decision to use force is extremely complex and most often not a situation that allows for deliberation. Instances that require use of force are typically what would be referred to as low frequency, high risk with no discretionary time, meaning the requirement to act is almost immediate. You'll note that the model is a wheel, and it's designed to take an officer back and forth through the continuum as an incident unfolds. That decision to use force is not linear, nor are the options of force used. Central to the decision to use force is the behavior of the subject that the officer is dealing with. However, I would like to point out 2 things that are consistent aspects of the model, and that is our officer presence and officer communication. In the overwhelming majority of cases that are just being present, professional in appearance and actions, as well as using appropriateness of communication is sufficient to de-escalate a situation, something that we spend a tremendous amount of time reinforcing during training. And when I say overwhelming majority, I mean approximately 0.2% of calls for service result in the application of force. That's represented in the report as 168 instances in 2019 in which force was used. It's important to note that Ontario Regulation 926 states when a use of force report is required of the police. Number 1, it's when an officer draws a handgun in the presence of a member of the public, excluding a member of a police service while on duty. Number 2 is when we point a firearm at a person. Number 3 is if we discharge a firearm, other than in training. Number 4 is when we use a weapon other than a firearm on another person, including the conducted energy weapon in cartridge or probe mode, and I'll speak to that later, and or the drive stun mode. And number 5 is when we use force on another person that results in an injury requiring medical attention. And I can speak to that as well. Typically, one report is submitted by one member. Several use of force options may be reported on one form during a single incident as an officer transitions through that use of force continuum. There are only 2 instances when a joint or team use of force report can be submitted for an incident. This is when the emergency response unit or the public order unit are deployed as a team, in which case they're permitted to submit a single report to capture their collective actions. These are all ministry dictated and provided for guidelines as contained in the legislation. Reports are reviewed by our use of force training sergeant for accuracy of information, as well as by a use of force committee that conducts an analysis on the force used to determine whether any officer requires additional training or if there are matters that might be learning opportunities for others. The use of force report itself is prescribed by the ministry in legislation and cannot be modified by local police agencies. It is the same report completed by every officer in the province of Ontario, In January of 2020, the ministry modified the form to allow police to capture the race of those people that we encounter in which force is used. Prior to that, this was not an available option on the form. And as mentioned, we're prohibited from modifying the form. It needs to be consistent for statistical comparison purposes. The 2020 Use of Force Board report will include the statistics in relation to race. As you will see in the report before you, in 2019, London Police Service officers were typically discharging their firearms to humanely dispatch an injured animal. You'll notice that in about 44% of the cases, officers used force when responding to a call in which a subject was in possession or reported to be in possession of a weapon. And of those weapons, 39 instances involved someone other than the police having a firearm involved in that incident. In another 41 incidents, police were encountered by people with edged weapons. The instances of officers encountering people that are armed with firearms is a trend we are seeing, and an upward trajectory is something that we continue to monitor. One particular force option available to police that's often of public interest is the conducted energy weapon. It's referred to as a CEW, but in media and popular culture, most often referred to as a taser. The CEW is used in one of three ways: a demonstrated force presence mode. That means that the officer removes it from the holster, the laser pointer is activated, and an electrical charge is activated, sounding the fact that the taser or the CEW is ready and available for use. The probe deployment mode is when an officer engages the trigger mechanism on the CEW. It deploys two probes that embed just under the skin to a subject, after which an electrical charge travels down the wires connecting the device to the probes to deliver a temporarily incapacitating electrical pulse that interferes with the muscle functioning between the probes. It allows an officer to gain compliance with the subject. Contrary to what you see in TV, a person is not left stunned or knocked out once that electrical charge has stopped. It is temporary for the duration of that electrical disruption. The drive stun mode, this is the mode that's typically used in close contact with a subject, in which the metal points at the front of the device, the CEW, complete the electrical circuit when touching the skin, and it develops and results in a more localized electrical disruption. Most often, just seeing the red laser light and hearing that CEW crackle with electricity is enough to make a subject reconsider anything they may be planning and results in an immediate de-escalation of force required. In 2019, about 15% of the 168 instances requiring the application of force resulted in an injury to subject. Those injuries were all minor in nature. Finally, of the 168 instances of use of force reported in 2019, we recognize that this is well below the 5-year trend. This may be very well attributed to the increased education and de-escalation techniques that are being taught to our officers. We continue to monitor these use of force applications, and will do so in 2020, and we adjust our training as necessary as we learn lessons. Subject to any questions, it's my recommendation the board receives this report for its information.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Betts. Open for any questions from members of the board. Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I just wanted to thank Deputy Chief Betts for the detail in both the written report and the oral report. I think this is the kind of information that is really critical in terms of that transparency and public trust. I am very interested in the decrease in numbers, and Deputy Chief, I know you pointed out that it's likely related to that increase in training. I think that's really good news. This is certainly, I think, a good news stories and those reductions in numbers and the reduction in need, whatever the reasons. But perhaps if there's something not positive about this, you can certainly point that out. But certainly, I think this level of detail and the fact that we're going to be doing the race-based data, adding that analysis in the future, I think that's also really, really good news. So thank you for walking us through that. I don't have a particular question. I just wanted to comment on on and compliment on that detail on such an important report.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Other comments or questions? Can I get a motion to receive? Moved by Mr. Lang, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. All in favor? Carried. Item 8. This is an annual statistical summary report regarding the Freedom of Information Act. Referred to Deputy Chief McIntyre for this item.
Chair, through you, I'll actually speak to this one if I may. This report is, and I'll be much more brief on this one. This is just brought to you as an annual board submission. It follows our submission to the IPC, Information Privacy Commission. Therefore, I'll just keep it brief. However, I would like to say that we do continue to see an increase in FOI requests. Many are increasingly complex to process and respond to. And generally, we are still able to maintain and meet the approved time periods. I will also point out that the costs associated to processing FOI requests far outweigh the revenues generated. We have no set control over the costs. Those fees are set, and they are intended to balance the access to information so that it's accessible to all. So subject to any questions about the report itself, it's my recommendation the board receives this for its information.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Betts. Questions or comments from board members? If not, Vice Chair Toth, go ahead.
Always with the questions. So I understand that this is a standard report. So it's the filling out is what it is, but I'm just curious, Deputy Chief Betts, if in some future reports we could have see some of that additional detail and more in particular in terms of the exemptions, but that's really where I want to see what's happening in terms of balancing that transparency while also protecting information that needs to be kept private. And I think that balancing act is really critical. So when I look at, for example, exemptions under Section 8 law enforcement, 922 for personal information, that's a high number. Can we see a little greater understanding of when that exemption would be applied? And is there any more information just in terms of an oversight function where we're just making sure that those exemptions are being applied appropriately and so on?
Thank you. That's a very fair request, and certainly something that we'll make sure that is in next year's report. Rest assured, we'll have a much more fulsome report for next year.
Thank you. Other questions in regards to the Freedom of Information Unit? Can I get a motion to receive? Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Mayor. All in favor? Carried. Our next item for the public agenda is the Criminal Investigation Division Mandatory Board Report. And I'll refer this to Deputy Chief McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair, through you. So in accordance with the London Police Services Board policy and of course adequacy standards, before you is a report that is generated. Again, this is 2019 data. It looks at what has happened in our criminal investigation branch for that entire division, for that entire year. They help out. A lot of our frontline will respond initially to calls, and then those calls are often transferred to CID or criminal investigation for completion. So it's just a snapshot on the work that is accomplished in CID. And what you see before you is that for 2019. And my recommendation is that the board receive this report, and I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Questions from the board? Can I get a motion to receive? By Deputy Mayor, second by Vice Chair. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 10, Organized Crime Section Report. Deputy Chief McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is an adequacy-driven report as per policy and the adequacy standards. And then I'll just table the report for you unless you have any questions or concerns. I'm more than happy to answer.
Just a reminder to the members of the public that we are going through our core business and that these items are posted if anyone wishes to review. And if there's any questions about agenda items, please do not hesitate to contact us. Any questions about this item from the board? If not, can I get a motion to receive? Moved by the mayor, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. All in favor? Carried. Item 11, the Internal Task Force's Adequacy Standards Report. Deputy Chief McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is drafted out of adequacy and board policy. It's very similar to those that we've been discussing. Again, we report on very specific things that might be encompassed in an internal task force as they come up. So just know that this, again, for the public is a high-level report and just really gives some definitions and some explanation into what we do each and every day from an investigative and an internal force capacity. So open to any questions, and my recommendation is that you receive this report.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from the board? Can I get a motion to receive?
I'll move it.
Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All in favor? Mr. Lang, thank you. And Deputy Mayor? Can you just give us a verbal approval there?
Okay, sorry, I was muted.
Thank you. Carried. Moving on to the audit of LPSB special funds. Deputy Chief Betts.
Thank you, Chair. This is an audit of the funds for the board. It's an annual report to the board submitted in accordance with Board Policy 106. There is little to report aside from the existing balance of $13,565.63 in the special funds count split between the TD Canada Trust and Tangerine. Director of Finance Services Kim Darling completes that audit board and reports back in the format presented in front of you. It's recommended the board receive this for their information.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Betts. Any questions or comments from the board? Yes, Vice Chair.
I wonder if we could just get an understanding of why we have these two accounts, and the one account has the TD Canada Trust has 193. Is that efficient? I would imagine that there might be service fees there. Is there a reason why we maintain two accounts? Should we?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Deputy Chair, Vice Chair. So there is a long history here of over 2 decades of when this special account came into effect, and it provided in 2000 the board provided direction during that time to deposit funds in the annual audit related to this account. That was done during an in-camera session of the board related to some of the financial aspects. In 2003, another memo to the board was made, again directing the allocation of funds, but it also included a certain amount of money to offset board costs for the Police Services Board's 150th anniversary. What remains from that spending is what's referenced here in this report. It is in accordance with the board's policy, your discretion as to how that the treatment of those funds is managed. It may warrant further review by the board in terms of how they choose to use that funds.
It's Jennifer, if you'd like me to speak to this.
Sure, go ahead.
So these are historical accounts that predated all of us in this board. I believe the $13,000 one, Tangerine, came from the time when we used to have funds deposit into that account from returned items. Now those returned items go to offset our budget annually. So there's an opportunity for the board to have some discussion about consolidating and how we use those funds that have stayed stagnant for 10 years.
at the board like to speak further to this topic? Vice Chair?
I would like to put forward a motion that we do a review of these accounts and look into efficiencies in terms of perhaps merging them into one account and actually explore what we want to do with those funds, considering they've been stagnant for years, and that doesn't seem like the best use of public funds.
Ms. Foster, did you get the wording of the motion?
Yes.
Here for the motion? Your seconder?
I'll second it.
Discussion on the motion? Call it to a question then. All in favor?
Yay.
Mr. Lang? Mr. Lang, if you could just raise your hand for me so I can make sure I catch it. Thank you. Carried. Any other discussion on this agenda item? Okay. Thank you. Moving right along into the year-end position and reserve fund balances. Chief Betts.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, the report presented in front of you is a summation of the 2019 operating budget year-end balance. As you'll no doubt know, a year-end position within 3% is considered a successful estimation and utilization of funds. And we're happy to report that the LPS managed the 2019 operating budget to within 0.5%, resulting in a year-end position of $528,518 from a revised operating budget of over 111 million. So very close accounting and adherence to efficiencies there. Personnel costs were lower than expected, but they were lower than expected and still under the 3% tolerance. Remarkable feat, really, given that this was a 4-year projection and our first attempt at a 4-year budget cycle, and with certain city directions. The line item costs were slightly higher than expected at 2.2% over the estimated requirements, but combined, that is what results in the 0.5% variance. Again, projecting 4 years forward for line items and costs associated to that is difficult to do with a high degree of certainty, but it was done so in a manner that was within our tolerances to accommodate and in those overages. The attachment to the board report provides you with a breakdown of the various components of the budget and the associated variances, including the year-end position and the 4 reserves that are also managed. The 4 reserves are maintaining a favorable and appropriate balance in accordance with the city provisions, and page 5 and 6 of your board report outline the purposes of each of those reserves. It's our recommendation that the board confirms the positive variance from the 2016 to 2019 operating budget, and that be deposited into the unfunded liabilities reserve fund. Currently, as you can appreciate, and as is noted within the board report, in a time when access to the unfunded liability reserve funds probably has never been more likely, and hence the reason for that deposit in there to make use of in accordance with the current provisions. Thank you.
Deputy Chief. Questions or comments in regards to the year-end funds? If not, then I'll take a motion to receive. Moved by Mr. Lang, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All in favor? Mayor Holder.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor. It's an affirmative there, Deputy Mayor.
Yay.
Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 14. This item pertains to the topic of the emergency situation and questions that have been raised in the community. The board has heard concerns from the public in regards to the role of the London Police Service as it pertains to the enforcement of bylaws that are currently being enforced as part of the current COVID-19 emergency situation. board has been in regular contact with Chief Williams and LPS leadership, and we wish to ensure that the public is aware that in our jurisdiction, bylaw enforcement falls under the jurisdiction of the City of London and not under the London Police Service. We recognize concerns from the community regarding the impact of bylaw enforcement on vulnerable members of our community. We would encourage members of our community to share feedback and suggestions in this regard with the City of London, as they are the party responsible for bylaw enforcement. We'd also like to turn the floor over to Chief Williams as well to speak to clarify this matter for the community and make sure the public is aware.
Sure. Thanks, Chair. So we have a really, really good, effective partnership with the City of London bylaw officers under the leadership of Horace Katolik. And his officers are designated as provincial offences officers, which allows them to enforce the provincial legislation. So the arrangement we have right now, which has been in place for several weeks, is that any complaints regarding violations about the emergency measures are forwarded to the city, and his members are attending to those complaints. And it's worked out quite well. I know they're very busy, but it's certainly freed our officers up to do the frontline policing that they're accustomed to and that the community expects. So at this point in time, we're not the primary call for service for these complaints. We're certainly willing to step in if we need to, and our officers aren't completely detached from it. If they see a group of people who are gathering in an area that they're not supposed to be in, then they can issue warnings as well. But by and large, they're being referred to the city, and it's working out well. So, subject to any questions?
Chief, any questions for members of the board? Vice Chair.
And this is an ongoing conversation. I think this is critical, and Chair, thank you for raising it, and I appreciate that. The important aspects is around this idea that police has not been utilizing their resources in this enforcement way. It's really fallen to bylaw officers. I think that's an important point to make sure that the public is aware of. I do think the other point that the public should be aware of as the board is very cognizant of concerns around potentials for policing of vulnerable populations, and that this is something obviously that if and when it involves police use, I know that Chief Williams and all of the administration have been very open, and we've had ongoing discussions about ensuring that those issues are dealt with when the time comes. So I just wanted people to be aware. And again, one of those, if possible, and again, these are conversations that will have to be had, is around collection of data, because as you know, without that data, and especially in terms of vulnerable communities, marginalized communities, we need that kind of statistics. I certainly hope the city is tracking that. Obviously, that's not within our purview as a police board, but in any event, I just wanted to make sure the public is aware of that.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any questions or comments? None noted. We're going to move to item 15. This is Title Towing Service Delivery Model Review. Was there someone there who wanted to comment? Okay. For item 15, the board wishes to make the public aware that the board has received a report from the London Police Service Administration in regards to the issue of London Police Service's service delivery model for towing. Given the need as a board to have moved our April meeting to a virtual format and the inherent limits on public participation and engagement with this format, there's consensus among the board that the issue of service delivery and towing and the report will be shared at a future meeting, and the board intends to engage in fulsome discussion on this topic with the opportunity for maximal public engagement and participation. We know this is an issue of significant interest to the public. We wish to update the public that the matter is under review and will be discussed as soon as we can. Are there any board members that wish to add anything further to this item? Anyone from administration? Okay. Yes, Mayor.
Thanks very much. You know, you often don't want to bring both the issues of council into Police Services Board, but I think it's worthy to comment on the really significant public input that we had received with respect to this contract. It's certainly within the purview of the board to renew this contract for one further year, which is the recommendation from our senior administrator or senior administrative staff. I'm inclined to go that way. But I will tell you that what I would also be looking for would be to hear from the public again. When I say the public, I'm talking about those organizations who have a vested interest in some of the outcomes here, who talked about standards, who talked about their own self-policing. So while we are open to receiving input from the public, I would certainly hope that those with vested interests make themselves absolutely clear with their own focus and direction, as has been suggested. I know that came through a council meeting, but I wanted to share that with the public as well. Certainly look forward to hearing back from them appropriately and through the right channels. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Holder. Any other comments on the service delivery and towing issue?
Jesse here.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor.
I just think it's a good idea to have it come forward in May.
Thank you. We'll share more information with the public and invite participation and engagement on the topic. We've got two new business items. The first is in regards to human trafficking grant. The board wants to congratulate the London Police Services on being recipient of a grant to assist with a human trafficking education and awareness campaign. The purpose of this grant is to fund the development and delivery of a comprehensive awareness campaign associated with the dangers of human trafficking targeting young girls on ages of 11 to 14. The focus of the campaign will be on prevention through awareness and initiation of dialogue on the issue. We will post more information about this grant for the public, but want to make sure the public is aware that our service will be again leading the way on targeting this issue and working with other members of our community to address prevention of a very important topic. Any comments or questions on this matter from board members, from administration? Chief McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair. We just wanted to say that we're excited. I think it's a great effort by the members who actually drafted the grant, but just the receipt of it, it is just about $100,000. And I think that's impressive. And we know that this is a topic that is not well, the public is really not well informed on. And I think all of those things, to be aware and to educate, and then to look at what do we do about this risk, I think is incredibly positive. So we're excited to drive this initiative forward. Thank you.
Councillor Cassidy.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I want to also say I agree wholeheartedly with the Deputy Chief. It is something that perhaps not a lot of people in London are aware of, this situation, this issue. You know, going back to Mayor Holder's comments on the last item and bringing in city issues, a lot of these items do overlap with what we deal with at City Council and then what we deal with here at the London Police Service Board. But this actually fits quite well in with the city's strategic plan. We have 5 pillars in the strategic plan, and one of them is creating a safe London for women and girls. And it talks specifically about the issue of human trafficking. And part of it is recognizing that London is, because of its geographical location, is a hub for human trafficking. So receiving this, having the police service, the London Police Service, receive this grant and be able to really go far in tackling this issue and addressing it, and having this public awareness campaign is really important for London and a really good fit with City Council's strategic plan. So I'm really happy to hear about this.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. Comments or questions? All right, so we had already passed to approve this. We won't redo that, but want to make sure that this is included as an information item. Next item in our new business relates to a COVID-19 status reporting policy. The board wishes the public to be aware that the board has received a memo from the Ministry of Community Safety and Corrections in regards to the rapidly evolving situation in the pandemic. The memo we've received indicates that we are encouraged as a police service board to develop a policy related to disclosure of COVID-19 status. We wish the public to be aware that the development of a board policy is distinct from the development of operational procedures as per the administration of London Police Service. The board is in regular communication with our administration and looking to draft a board policy on the matter of COVID-19 status reporting that is as sensitive to the needs of our community, as well as sensitive to the many ethical, privacy, confidentiality, and health status issues that are inherent to a policy of this nature. And lastly, sensitive to the kinds of timelines that might be involved. We as a board are committed to continuing to work with the community, the public, and our administration on ensuring that policy is drafted in an inclusive way. I will turn it over to our chief for any further comments on this item.
So we received the same correspondence from the ministry, and we've worked closely with internally and also with David Tilley, our own advisor, and as well with other services. We realized that we're required to develop a procedure, a service procedure, insofar as how our officers obtain medical information, which we appreciate is private and personal. But some of that information is needed to safeguard the health and well-being of our officers. So we have a procedure in place. It's, by all accounts, it's been a very fast process, and Mr. Tilley has been extremely accommodating in liaising with us between the ministry and the service to ensure we have a workable procedure in place that satisfies all the requirements. It's a very dynamic situation for everybody. This is the first time any of us have gone through this, so we recognize that the parameters of the procedure and what's required in the regulations may change, so we'll be flexible with that. And we're committed to protecting the welfare of our officers, but also at the same time recognizing the importance and respecting the privacy of the personal health information we collect. So that's what we will do, and like I said, we had the procedure in place, and we'll continue to amend it and improve it whenever those opportunities present.
Thank you, Chief Williams. Other comments or questions on this matter from other members of the board? Deputy Mayor, is that a comment there? Other board members wish to speak to this? Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair, through you. I think there's a few really critical things about this policy, at least from a personal opinion. One is obviously it needs to be consistent with the procedures, the internal procedures, and obviously we'll be working on that, as the Chair has mentioned. I think what's really unique challenge is that we really are trying to balance the need to keep our first responders safe and provide them with the information necessary to stay safe in the front lines when they're dealing with members of the public, and also protect the safety of members of the public in the same sense, with balancing the very, very sensitive private health information of people and the potential consequences of having knowledge of that sensitive information. So I just want to assure the public, at least from a personal perspective, that the policy we'll be working on will try to find a good balance. We are restricted, just so people know, to a certain extent by the province, because they have mandated certain things be a part of the policy. But some of the things that we'll be looking at is retention of the information, destruction of the information, who will have access to that information, who will have access to a specific portal and then disseminate that information, trying to limit and contain who knows what, when, and for how long, and so on. So just for everyone's awareness, those are the things that we'll be looking at. And again, to some extent, it might be out of our hands. It might be simply a provincial direction. But where possible, we'll certainly try to do our best to balance the safety of first responders and the public with the privacy implications of the same.
You voiced your thought, Toth. Comments? So we'll keep the public updated on this very important matter. Are there any other additional items, addenda, or new business for, yes, Vice Chair Toth?
Apologies, I thought that I might raise this in public session. I brought it up briefly in BMO. I just wanted the public to be aware that the Ontario Provincial Police did release their panel, an independent review panel final report on the issues of mental health and death by suicide. That's just come out, and obviously there's been so much on the go. So I know that administration and the association and the rest of the board are playing a little bit of catch up and reviewing that report. But I just thought it's really important, even though we're in the middle of this emergency, that report not fall by the wayside. The mental health of our first responders and the police is really critical. So I know, and this has already been discussed, and to be fair to everybody, administration's on this already. I know that this is going to be brought forward in a future meeting, but I thought it was worth noting that that report has been issued and that it is going to be reviewed and discussed to see from a governance perspective if there's anything, and then from an administration perspective, anything from the report that can be implemented here in London, even though it was directed at the OPP.
Thank you.
If I can just,
please.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the Vice Chair's comments. That report is very important. We've been waiting for it. It dovetails nicely with the other Office of the Chief Coroner report, which we received late last year. We just received this latest report, and it's on our near-term radar to review it and take action on it. So and we can report back to the board on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Williams. Any additional comments? Anything else to share from anyone on the board? All right. Well, we hope that by our next meeting, May 21st, there may be an opportunity for us to have more engagement, but nonetheless, we are all patient and resolute that we will see through this emergency, continue to follow public health directives in regards to physical distancing, continue to reach out to one another and remain socially connected, and in particular, to continue to look out for some of our most vulnerable, our elderly, and other members of our community who may be suffering from this pandemic in the shadows. Thank you to everyone for your participation. Can I get a motion for adjournment? Mayor, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. All in favor? All right, thank you so much to any members of the media, the public. If there's questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. If you do wish to speak to us in further detail about our business or agenda items, you can contact us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.